Welcome to the Profile Corner. In today's video I'll be building a caddy for the glue that I've got in the shop, and also the various glue brushes that I have. A year or two ago I bought a lifetime supply of glue brushes. These are acid brushes. If I can find the link to these, I got a very good deal on them from Amazon. These are made in the United States. I'll include the link in the video description if I'm able to find it. And also, the caddy will be able to store straws borrowed from one of the fast food restaurants, which could be used to scrape out glue around joints in your woodworking projects, just by cutting it at an angle on the end. So this is going to be roughly 24 inches across, so that it'll be able to fit into the top of the clamp cart. It'll actually stretch across the top and it'll be removable. There'll be a handle on top of it which will actually get glued on later on, and it will extend out over the edges of the clamp cart to allow this to hang essentially at the back of the clamp cart. So we need to get started on this. It's going to be 4 1/4 inches tall up to where the handle starts, and it's going to be 6 1/2 inches across, which would allow enough room to store this big box of glue brushes inside that caddy. Okay, so I've got a leftover board here from a previous project. This was a board that actually contained some nails in it that I found and removed, and it looks like I can get a portion of the boards that I need out of this section here, and maybe I can get the other portions out of this section. So let's head over to the saw and we'll start cutting out the pieces that we need from this. Okay, to start I just need to make a single rough cut to section this off, so that this will be one section of the board and this will be another section of the board, so that I can get rid of this split that's going down through here. It's actually a saw cut from the sawmill. Okay, now we can head over to the table saw and cut these boards down to the right width, and then we'll come back over to the radial arm saw and cut them to the right length. Okay, these boards all need to end up at 4 1/4 inches wide. However, I need to get rid of the jointed edge here because it's not in real great shape. It's got little bumps in it. And so I'll cut these boards down to 4 3/8 first, and then I'll set the rip fence at 4 1/4 for another pass. Okay, and I just made a mistake here. I should have referenced this other edge, and so now I'm going to have a problem with the split that's in this board. So I ended up referencing the wrong edge, and now I don't think I'll be able to get all the parts I need out of this one board. That's okay, we'll move forward with it and see what we can do to recover from that problem. And now I'll set the rip fence to 4 1/4. So now for the recovery, what I could possibly do here is to take a look at this board right here. I could potentially glue that on to this other board that was cut too narrow, and then that should help me recover from the problem. So if I just put this up onto here and take a look at where I need to cut it. Okay. Okay, so this board is 1 9/16 inch wide, and so if I can cut this board so that it's narrower by 1 9/16, then I can glue these two together, and then I should have the perfect solution for this problem. Okay, so what's the best way to do that? Should we go this way here? That should work. I've got to be really careful how I push it through. So if I did this right, these two boards together should be exactly 4 1/4 inches wide. Okay, and that's actually right where they're at. That's 4 1/4 inches wide. So now I need to get these two boards glued up together before I move on to doing the other steps. So I'll go take care of that now. Okay, let's apply a little bit of glue here. Bring them together and then rub them back and forth a little bit to smear the glue onto the other board here. And I'll grab 2 more clamps out of the clamp cart. These will go on top to spread out the pressure. And I gotta put this down just a hair. We're actually up a little bit high right there. Okay. Okay, so we'll let the glue set up for probably about an hour or so, and then we can head over to the radial arm saw and we can cut these boards to length. And I've got to cut two boards at 5 3/4 from this board. Now I got to cut these boards down to 23 and 15/16. Okay, now we can head over to the dados saw to create the rabbets. I want to put a 3/8 inch deep, 3/4 inch wide rabbet into the ends of each of these two boards. And what I've done is I've installed a 3/8 inch wide dado stack. This is exactly 3/8 of an inch wide. And then I have a 3/8 inch wide setup block right here that I use to space it from the fence, and also to set the height of the dado stack. So now that should be perfect so that I can use the miter gauge to put in the rabbets. That's the first pass. Now I can make a second pass to take out the remaining amount. Let's verify that that's actually 3/8 of an inch deep. That's a perfect fit. Okay, while we're here at the dado saw, we need to create a groove for the bottom. The bottom will be out of 1/2-inch plywood, and of course that 1/2-inch plywood is narrower than 1/2 inch. So we'll have to measure it and get it to be exactly the right size. Okay, I've used a 1/4-inch setup block to set the distance to the fence, to the blade. I have not adjusted the height of the dado stack. My plywood is approximately 0.4895 inches in thickness, which is just about 15-30 seconds. Okay, so now I'm ready to make these cuts. I've made a mark on the boards with an X, showing where I want to cut that groove. Careful, keep my fingers away from the blade. And I need to reset the fence. Okay, to do that, what I should be able to do is just use this 1/4-inch setup block, and right next to it, use the 15-30 second setup block, and now all that I've got to do is move the rip fence over until the corner of the setup block here matches up with the edge of the dado stack. Okay, that looks pretty close. I want to get the boards oriented correctly on the table saw's table so that I don't have to look at them each time I make a cut. Okay, we're all set there. Okay, let's do a quick test fit. Is a very tight fit onto the plywood. So I need to move the rip fence slightly so that it's further away. Okay, that should be enough. Now we'll take another pass and then try another test fit. That fits on it tightly. I think that'll work. Okay, now we have to head over to the other table saw and cut the sheet of plywood to the appropriate size. Okay, this plywood has to end up at 5 3/4 inch wide. However, I've got the factory edge over here that I want to get rid of, so I've set the fence to 6 3/4 for a starting point. I'll actually take it down to being just less than 5 3/4 inch wide. Down to 5 3/4 or a little bit less than that. And target about 30 seconds left. And by the way, I took the rip blade out of this saw. That's a 24 tooth rip blade, and I put in my 50 tooth Forest Woodworker 2 blade. Now we can head over to the radial arm saw, and we can cross cut this to length, because I don't have the cross cut arm installed on the table saw here right now. So we can do it over at the radial arm saw pretty easily. That has an 80 tooth Forest blade on it, and so it should leave a nice cut. Okay, the plywood needs to be cut to 23 3/16 inch long. So I'll first square up the one end before I cut it to length. And now I'll do a dry fit up off camera, and then I'll do some light sanding on these boards before we glue them up. Now we can do the glue up of the parts. I just need to verify once again that the plywood fits in. It was a little bit of a tight fit, likely because the plywood's slightly bowed. And so now maybe after sanding it'll fit more easily into the grooves. Okay, I've inserted the bottom into the sides. I had to use a little bit of force to get it to go in. And now what I should be able to do is glue up the tenons. Now what you're going to do is glue in the end boards. I've already applied some glue here. Tight fit. Apply a little more glue down here. Applying a little more glue. Okay, so we'll add this together. Let's go to the other end. Now let's hold this for a little bit. See if I can get the end cap on. That looks good. Okay, now I'll get out a couple clamps. We can clamp this together. Should probably check it for square. That looks pretty good. Okay, now I need another clamp to go lengthwise. Possibly 2 clamps. And now we can let this glue set up for at least a couple hours. It's actually going to be overnight. And then we'll come back and we'll finish it up. Okay, the glue is dried. I've just taken this out of the clamps. And as you can see here, we're at exactly 23 and 15/16 inch long, which is what I was targeting. Unfortunately, I tried to install this into the clamp cart, and the clamp cart gets to be about 1/4 inch narrower at the front where you approach it. And so I actually need to make this a little bit narrower. And so what I can do is I can take this over to the belt sander and just sand this end on the 6x48 belt sander to take this down a bit. And I'm hoping that that'll make it so that it'll be easier to slide this into the clamp cart. I've installed a miter gauge into the miter gauge slot, which will hopefully help me keep this straight. And then what I can do is I can just put this up onto the table, up against the miter gauge slot, and then just run that in, and hopefully that'll work for me. Flip it over if it looks like it's not cutting evenly. That's how it looks on the end. I'm going to go do a test fit up, and then we'll come back. Yeah, I've measured it, and we've taken off about 1/32 of an inch in the length. I need to take off just a little bit more, maybe another 1/32, and then it'll fit easily up into the clamp cart. I was able to get it to fit up in there, but it's not a real easy fit. go test it again. I have a feeling that this is going to be perfect for us now. Okay, now it's about a 32nd of an inch less than 23 7/8 long. That fits up into there really easily now. And so I think that'll work for us. Now we're ready to go on to the next step of creating the handle that'll go across the top. Okay, next what I need to do is cut the board for the handle that'll fit onto the top. It'll be 25.5 inches wide, and I figured that I would make it 2.5 inches tall. The last remaining good board, or at least one of the last remaining good boards, it doesn't have any bug damage in it and very few knots in it, is this board. And I should be able to get the 25.5 inch long section out of this portion right through here. I've got the rip fence already set at 2.5 inches wide, so now I just need to make the pass through. And I've got a good edge here. Actually, this edge went through the jointer. I can feel the bumps on it. So maybe what I want to do is I want to make this a little bit wider than 2.5 inches, and I can pass it through twice. So that way I get rid of that jointed edge. Over, take it down to 2.5 inches. Okay, now we can cut this down to 25.5 inches long. I don't yet have the crosscut arm installed on the table saw. However, I do have a 40-tooth combination blade installed in the table saw, so I can just use my other miter gauge to make this cut right at the table saw, so I don't have to drag the camera over to the radial arm saw for just 2 cuts. I need to make it 25.5 inches long. Okay, now we can start setting up for the handle to be cut at the bandsaw. I'll have to trace out a profile on here that looks decent first. Okay, here's the layout that I decided on. It may not look very nice, but it should be effective, I believe, because I should be able to reach my hand in here and pick up on it. So now we just need to cut this out at the bandsaw. I've got some straight sections here, which I could use the fence to help cut, but I think I'll just cut those freehand. And this straight section here, I may actually add a little bit of a curvature to this section when I cut it at the bandsaw. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And I've got to think about how I can make these cuts so that I'm able to allow the bandsaw blade to run free, so I don't have to back out quite a distance. And unfortunately, this one here, I'm not able to come in this direction and create a clearance for the cut. So I'll just have to back it out very carefully. Backing it out so that I don't run the risk of pulling the blade off the wheel inside. Okay, so now I've got that off. And now I can come in this direction. I can add in clearance. This direction. Okay, so I did add a little bit of a curvature to it on both ends here. Now I should be able to cut out this middle portion. And I've got a little bit of an issue. I can't get in close enough. Maybe I can do a little grip fence. Get a little bit more space. And now I can actually come in at a slight angle. Here that I cannot get to smoothly. Now I'll just come back to the opposite direction. Okay, now we can take this over to the oscillating spindle sander and clean up the bandsaw cut. Okay, now we'll just turn on the oscillating spindle sander and take off a little bit of material. It's coming along nicely. I need to take off a little bit more in this section here and also right there. looks good. Looks good also. This would probably actually look a little bit nicer if it had round corners. Let's see if we can take that down just ever so slightly here on the sander. We're bumping into the wall, unfortunately. Okay, a little bit more right through here. It's looking pretty good. I could probably take off just a little bit more right here. Okay, so I think we're about ready to set this up to be glued on. Yeah, I was originally planning on adding on a round over onto this after I got it glued onto the box, but looking at it, it's going to be hard to get a round over on this inside profile here that'll be on the inside of the box. And so what I should probably do is do that now, is put the round over on it. So I just want to put a round over in this section through here and also along here on both sides. Okay, that really dressed it up nicely, and it makes it a lot nicer to hold on to it. So now we can get it glued onto the box. Okay, let's do the glue up. The glue's a little heavy on this end. Now I've got to look for my landing marks. Then I get 3/4 inch. Okay. Now this is going to want to squirt around a little bit on me. So I'll do is slightly apply pressure to it. This one time, I'll clamp on and apply light pressure. Okay, I need to move this closer to the camera. That looks good. Other end. The line is good right there. Let's get down here too. Okay, now there's longer clamps further up here. Okay, we'll let that glue set up for a couple hours and then we'll scrape it off. And while we're waiting for that glue to dry, we've got to create some pieces that overhang on the front side here. and also back here, so that this does not tip when it's put into the clamp cart. So we'll get started working on those pieces right now, and then we can get them glued on also. Okay, so here's the profile that I decided on. These are scrap cutoffs from the other piece, and what I've done here is I've made it so that this section through here will be 1 inch square. It'll come down to 1/4 inch in height down here, so the total piece will be 3 inches long. The section through here will be 1 inch, and then I'll have a slight curve through this section right through here. Let's see, the safest way to do this. There's the first one cut. Okay, I'll get these sanded over at the Oscillating spindle sander, and I'll get them glued on to the project. I'll do that off camera. Okay, now I have a trim router with a very small radius round over bit, and what I want to do is I just want to run over any of these edges that I can access just to knock off the sharp corners, so it's a little bit less likely to get dented when it's in use. Okay, now I just have a little bit of final sanding to do, and this will be ready for use. There's the completed glue caddy. I found my scrapers for scraping off glue, both the big one and the small one. And I decided those could go into the glue caddy also, along with the straw. There's no harm in having them next to each other in here. And as a matter of fact, I may use my 3D printer to print out little trays to go down inside to keep them separated. But I may not do that actually. Here's my lifetime supply of glue brushes. They fit nicely down into there. I'll probably leave the top on this box closed when I don't need to get out a new glue brush. I usually wash the glue brushes after use, and so this supply will last me quite a long time. Okay, there's the glue caddy up in the clamp cart. It seems to fit up into there nicely, and I think that this will come in quite handy for me when I need to do a glue up. I can either just take the parts right out of here, or I can take this entire caddy over to the workbench if that's more convenient. By the way, I've got my corner clamps back here from Woodpeckers, and they mount very nicely between these two rails. However, what I think I'll do is I actually move this over to the other side so that it's with the F-style clamps. That way I only have obstructions coming out of one side of the cart, not both sides. That should make it easier to navigate the cart through the shop. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.